All right. Hi, everybody, and welcome to the weekend review. Um, I know I say it every week, but it has been a busy week, starting with some pretty um, significant social media moves. I think we all know what I'm referencing there. There's been some a new token was announced this week. Um, as usual, there were a couple of hacks. Another country adopted Bitcoin as legal tender. And as I'm sure you all know, we have a hotly anticipated um, metaverse launch happening this weekend. So why don't we start, as we always do, with Christian, our editor-in-chief, to give us a rundown on what some of the main stories of the week were, and we'll go from there. Christian, how are you doing today?
Yeah, thanks, Jacob. I'm good. I'll start with the beginning of the week and um, the thing we've kind of spoken about before, but more coming at this through the lens of what does this actually mean for cryptocurrency and why should we care? Which is Elon Musk's Twitter buyout. As we all know by now, right? He paid $44 billion for a 100% stake in Twitter. And yeah, this has become a big topic sort of in the technology world and just broader, I guess, mainstream world as well. But a lot of people in crypto are talking about this specifically. And there's this question of how he could maybe use crypto within this. He has obviously expressed interest in the past in this space and this asset class, not least Dogecoin. What would that mean? I think there are different routes we could see. It's hinted at stuff like facilitating Dogecoin payments. I've definitely seen more talk of that this week, and we did see Dogecoin spike on this announcement. And yeah, there's also the idea that Balaji, the Coinbase CTO, former Coinbase CTO, and like widely renowned sort of figure in the space, of like a potential airdrop, and he was essentially coming up with a way that he could sort of tokenize Twitter. Now, I think that's a bit far out and probably not something that's going to happen anytime soon. But this is quite a relevant move and something that we should be paying attention to because there is definitely this potential for crypto to become increasingly sort of integrated within one of the largest sort of communications platforms in the world. Crypto Bahamas happened this week, and there was a fair amount of talk of this buy there. So I was watching the Cathy Wood talk, and she was pretty positive about this move and suggesting that she thinks that crypto's. I think her quote was going to start permeating Twitter increasingly as a result of this. And we also saw that Jack Dorsey was pretty pleased with this as well, and we know that he has kind of moved towards introducing very much like Bitcoin and Lightning focused payments, at least while he was at the helm of the company. And then also at Crypto Bahamas, as we saw, like Sam Bankman-Fried kind of discussing this through the idea of decentralizing social media and kind of creating, I guess, a place where you could put all sort of messages on a blockchain. And then also following this with a hint of irony, we saw Aave's founder, Stani Kulachov. He kind of made a joke post about becoming Twitter CEO this week, after the sort of buy news came, and he actually got banned from the app for it. And Stani and Aave, they actually have a project called Lens Protocol, which is attempting to create decentralized social media. I don't know how much it's taken off yet, but it's quite an interesting approach. They basically create these NFT profiles And yeah, I think they're in a stage of like encouraging builders to head over there, and their website sort of details different use cases you can do, like verification and ways to for essentially creators to engage with their fans. Um, so yeah, I mean, a lot of the talk among, I guess, people that aren't necessarily interested in crypto has been this whole thing around what it could mean for free speech and censorship and this kind of thing. But I think it will also spark conversation around the possibilities of decentralized social media and stuff like Lens and how that may look. Um, cool. Yeah. Beyond Elon, in the Ethereum world, the power users had a big update and good news this week with Optimism announcing an airdrop or a series of airdrops. So I won't say this was particularly anticipated, because there was the speculation over whether layer twos like Optimism would do this, and a lot of people were saying at one point, "Oh no, the layer twos won't, like their token is ETH." But I think that's changed. It's obviously changed now. But I've seen increasing hints that even the ZK rollups, which aren't really getting much traffic at the moment, there are hints that they're planning one as well. And now that Optimism is issuing a token, we can, I wouldn't be at all surprised to see Arbitrum, the other optimistic rollup that's currently the biggest layer two on ETH, doing similar, because this is a game of attracting liquidity and competition between projects, and if you don't have a token and someone else does, then you stand to sort of lose out in the race. That's what we've seen in the past. So yeah, maybe we'll see others follow through. But in any case, Optimism, they announced it this week, so it's going to launch in the coming weeks, and they placed a specific focus on, I guess you could say, users that are really contributing to the health of the Ethereum ecosystem beyond just activities like yield farming. So there were different rewards and criteria that you could meet to get like a certain number of tokens, and it wasn't just stuff like using Optimism. It was if you voted on a Gitcoin grant or in certain governance proposals, you would also get an allocation. So yeah, quite a few people got rewarded. I mean, they were quite strict. I actually thought I did. I thought I met several of the criteria, but I didn't end up getting any. I think because my date, I didn't fall within the right dates. But nonetheless, a lot of people are going to get this, and it's going to be a nice payout, I think, for some people. Although having said that, there are 4 billion tokens, so might not be as big as the likes of Ethereum name service. But yeah, they say that there are a series of airdrops coming as well. So those who didn't get in the first round might have a shot later if they kind of start using it more actively. And they've also detailed how it's kind of gonna obviously form a key part of their governance and sort of the way the way it sort of functions in future. Beyond this, I think we can sort of look out for potentially Arbitrum in future. So for anyone who hasn't used Optimism and maybe hasn't used Arbitrum, now might be a good time to sort of make that move over to layer two, because I wouldn't be surprised for others to follow. Cool. Yeah, there was also a decent amount in the Bitcoin world over the past few days. As Jacob mentioned, another country adopting Bitcoin as legal tender. So this was Central African Republic, has firstly introduced a bill, and then it got signed into law. So this broke midweek, and I mean, this didn't get as much attention as when El Salvador did, but there is sort of this increasing momentum behind Bitcoin and its possible role as a as a currency. So we also saw over Bitcoin 2022 earlier this month, there were a few announcements of this nature then. So a senator from Mexico also came on stage at Bitcoin at the conference, and she said how she was planning to meet with the president to discuss Mexico introducing a bill for this. And then, as part of the same talk, there was someone from like an area of Honduras, Prospera, and then like an autonomous area of Portugal as well, Madeira, I believe. And yeah, they're variously making moves towards adopting Bitcoin, either whether it's like offering, capital gains tax with like tax-free payments on it, or just generally accepting it as a currency, or like making moves to sort of adopt it in earnest. Similarly, we saw Lugano do this, a similar play a couple of months ago, and theirs was like as part in a partnership with Tether. So they're working on sort of introducing Bitcoin, USDT, and then their native token for the city as well. And yeah, we're just seeing an increasing sort of, I guess, acceptance of Bitcoin as like, a new asset class and a kind of, potential sort of currency as well in various parts of the world now. Even just yesterday, there was like talk of a similar bill coming in Panama, and as sort of El Salvador was kind of the first, and there's potential that is setting this domino effect where it's kind of just becoming more sort of widely accepted. Now the biggest Bitcoin fans will say that this is the start of what they call hyper Bitcoinization, the idea that the world's reserve asset becomes Bitcoin. I don't know if we're quite there yet, but nonetheless, clear developments there. Similarly, beyond the idea of like nation states and territories, there are also just titans of TradFi, I would call them, like massive firms in the traditional finance world, taking very clear steps towards cryptocurrency adoption. Now, obviously, these guys move faster. Sorry, they move slower than the standard DeFi projects or the NFT space where things move at lightning speed. But you are increasingly seeing various announcements that suggest that crypto is becoming increasingly intertwined with the sort of traditional finance system. So Fidelity this week announced that they'll allow Bitcoin payments to 401k retirement accounts. Now, this is something that we kind of hear now, and it's like, oh, okay, yeah, that's cool. But really, 2 years ago, this announcement would have been like unthinkable. But we've seen an increasing number of things like this, and now it's kind of not that surprising. But I think the rate of change that we've seen over the last couple of years, like really since the sort of 2020/2021 bull run, in which MicroStrategy, among others, were really taking big steps towards trying to sort of make Bitcoin more mainstream. It's kind of normal now for Fidelity to, be allowing this. Like, oh yeah, of course they are. It's sort of like we've reached a point where it feels like it's more inevitable, and that wasn't something you could have said a couple of years ago. Similarly to Fidelity, another of the giants of traditional finance, BlackRock, has launched its first blockchain-focused ETF. So this is called iShares, and it doesn't give direct exposure to crypto assets. Not really surprising for a firm like BlackRock, given that it's sort of the world's largest asset manager. But it has exposure to companies like Coinbase and yeah, a couple of mining companies as well. And yeah, this denotes also that BlackRock is sort of looking at this and yeah, really giving some indication that it acknowledges the potential and that it sees that a company such as Coinbase could yeah, really be worth something in the next decade or so. And then cool to round out. I mean, this is a story that's kind of ongoing, and in some senses, it hasn't happened yet. But it's something we've been following closely all week, and it's going to be the big story of the weekend. Definitely something we should talk about today is the next highly anticipated NFT drop, which is Otherside. And for those not familiar, Otherside is the metaverse world created by the team behind Bored Ape Yacht Club. So, Bored Ape Yacht Club is, I think, it's comfortable to say, the world's biggest and most successful NFT project today. Launched last April, and the company behind this is called Yuga Labs. Now, these 10,000 apes soared in popularity. There were a series of airdrops that enriched the holders, and the price of the NFTs went up to crazy highs. They're now trading at about $400,000 the last time I checked. And Yuga Labs has basically, over the last year, they've scored like hit after hit. Like everything they've done has been just it's like they can't set a foot wrong, right? And they've really kind of leaped ahead of everyone else in the space, like other projects that were kind of described as so-called blue chips, but really it's Bored Ape Yacht Club that have stolen the show, I would say. And I say this as someone who doesn't really have any exposure to this ecosystem or really even rate the art for the apes, but you can't deny how successful they've been. And Otherside is something that they announced a few weeks ago now, but it's been in the works it's what they've promised in their roadmap for a long time. This was always the vision of where things were going with them. And the idea is they launched with a token initially it was through a DAO, but really it was the Bored Ape token. It was like the Bored Ape holders got this token called ApeCoin, and ApeCoin is going to be used to power Otherside. And tomorrow's launch we don't know much about it, but we know they're dropping these things called Other Deeds, which are in NFT form. It's rumored that they might be plots of land, and they've been quite clever about this because you need to have ApeCoin to buy a plot of Otherside, whatever these NFTs are. You need to own Ape. So having ETH isn't enough. You need to trade your ETH to Ape and then Ape in, as it were. So this launch, to get in, there was like quite a strict process. I had to fill out KYC and this kind of stuff. I actually did this because I'm potentially going to go in for this sale tomorrow. I think it's going to be a big talk. I think it's likely to sell out as well, and there will be a lot of hype surrounding this. What their metaverse world is going to entail, I'm not sure, but we do know that everything Bored Ape Yacht Club has done so far has tended to be followed by lots of hype and speculation, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see the same this weekend, even if it's short-lived. I think there's going to be a lot of buzz on this over the next coming days, and it's going to be fun to watch that play out. So, I think that rounds everything up, and looking forward to diving into the rest of it.
Thank you, Christian. As always, that was a lot to take in, but a digestible summary of the week's news. I think maybe where to start. I think maybe we start from, like, as we do always, start from the end and work our way backwards. Let's start with the Otherside launch. I would be curious to hear, like, just open up to the room. How many of you are excited about this? How many of you are any of you excited about this? Like, Christian, you said you might get in line. What's driving you? Just pure speculation, or do you feel any affinity for the project?
Yeah, I mean, this is something I've said about Bored Apes in the past, right? It's like I can't really complain that they're priced at 100 and something ETH, um, whatever it is at the moment, because I would have sold early because I'm not really passionate about it. Like, I don't look at any of the apes and think like, oh, I wish that was my profile picture. So when I talk about going into, um, the Otherside launch for a plot of land, it's purely from a speculative buy in the sense that I know that I can't say I know, right? But like I believe these things will sell out tomorrow, and I believe that there will be because I've followed this market for closely for long enough that I believe that there will be a buzz for some time, and there'll be lots of excitement, similar to how there was with Moonbirds, and we saw how that went, and we talked about it last week. I think that could happen with this as well. And so, if I go in for this sale, that's my kind of thesis behind it. And yeah, that's for that reason. I would kind of not be surprised if the mint price ends up being a reasonable sort of outlay for how much demand grows on the secondary market.
You kind of mentioned this sort of anticipated arc for sales, like sort of a period in which these things will be very hotly sought after and probably command very high prices. And um, we've seen that with other NFT projects as well. And relatively few have the same staying power as something like Bored Apes, which again, they launched last April, so this is uh, a product that's only been on the market for a year, and there's no telling what an ape will be worth a year from now. I guess what I'm trying to say is, or what I'm trying to ask is, the we call NFTs digital collectibles, and I guess does anybody want to take a swing at what percentage they think of NFT collections are pure, like genuinely collectible? And I mean that in the sense that, you know, 20, 30 years from now, people will look back on certain NFTs, assuming that these blockchain networks are still up and running. Um, like, which ones do you think people are going to look back on and like original Star Wars figures and say, "Man, that's really cool. It's amazing that you have an original Bored Ape." And what criteria do you think is going to produce that kind of staying power, or is it all just a fad and none of these are going to last? Tim, you knew I was coming to you already.
Yeah, I've already been thinking how to address this. I
Yes.
mean, like the ones that are doing well now, ultimately, I think. I mean, there's a clear divide between just trash that keeps getting minted and, goes through this like hype and death cycle constantly. You see it every week. There's like 10 or 20 projects launching like this. And then there's the ones that stick around, anything that's consistently been in the top 50 NFT collections on OpenSea for volume over the last like half a year or so, right? I mean, obviously Bored Apes. Actually, gonna have to bring it up right now so I can look at some proper examples. Yeah, like Apes, VFriends probably gonna have some stopping power. What are those on CloneX, stuff like that? Obviously, CryptoPunks, Azuki's, Doodles. Let me find one more. Oh yeah, Cryptodes. Yeah, one of my favorites. I don't have one though. So I think those ones will certainly be people will value going into the future, and that's just sort of in the PFP realm of NFTs. I think when you open it up more broadly to things like generative art, yeah, I think stuff like autoglyphs. I mean, they were very quickly sort of like valued quite highly as some of the first pieces of art to ever be minted as NFTs. And then yeah, stuff like Tyler Hobbs, Fidenzas, and then you've got like Ringers too, and some other art blocks pieces. For sure, those I believe they may not be the talk of the NFT space now, but I think that they will hold value and be recognized as some of the first pieces of successful art. to make it big on the blockchain, I guess. So I guess that's what I'd say about it, is the stuff that's doing well now and has proven itself to maintain popularity over months. Yeah, I think that they'll have stopping power and be recognized in the years to come.
Yeah,
So
I'd,
go ahead.
I'd like to agree with one point Tim raised and then disagree with another. So the question was 20 to 30 years out, right?
Mhm.
If we look at the top 50 on OpenSea today, I think max one or two of those will be remembered in 20 to 30 years. And of the PFP market, like the profile picture trend, yeah, maybe Bored Apes and CryptoPunk survive, right? But I think in general, the rest, yeah, not necessarily. This is like 1 year into a, a brand new sort of paradigm in like in digital assets and like ownership. I don't necessarily think we'll kind of remember cool cats in like maybe even 3 years. They might trade at 7 ETH now, but yeah, new, as you said, Tim, there are new ones of these coming out every day, right? And yeah, I feel that it's already reached maybe a point of saturation in some ways, and yeah, although you have the ones that are standing out at the moment, how does that change when we have 10 blue chips a year, and then we have another 10 next year, and everyone is kind of competing. We'll see how it goes. But then you mentioned the generative art space and the likes of the big names in that scene now, right? So you have stuff like Tyler Hobbs or Dmitry Cherniak behind Ringers. Now, although people have criticized platforms like art blocks and so-called overproduction because it there are a lot of mints, they come out on a frequent basis, and they're also very expensive. It can be sometimes 1 to 2 ETH to just to mint some of these pieces. Now, I think when I look at some of these collections, it's only every few weeks and it doesn't happen that often, but there are times where I look at them and I say like, okay, I would really love to buy this. I'd love to have one of these because it's the kind of thing I would imagine putting up on my wall, right? Now this doesn't happen that often, and some of these, I minted one from Thomas Lynn Peterson from his recent drop on Ethereum, and it was pretty expensive, and it had just a short-lived buzz, and now it's back at like mint price. But actually, when we think about 10 or 20 years out, these like actual coded pieces of, art that have just been produced by an algorithm, is that going to hold better than, a photo of like a duck wearing like a hat in one photo and then some sunglasses in the next? I think is much more likely to survive for the long term. And yeah, the question is which ones, right? And I guess if you're into this market and you can afford to be a collector, then you look for the ones that speak to you. But yeah, as I say, it's year one, and at least I say it's year 1 or 2 in like the idea of NFTs as a mainstream, a thing that's entered into kind of mainstream consciousness. And so 20 years out or even 10 years out, very difficult to predict at the moment.
Right. Ant, I see you unmuted. Did you have a comment?
Yeah, I was going to say I feel like probably a bit more optimistic. Maybe like I think a lot of the stuff from last year, that could really be remembered. Like because we had DeFi summer, we had NFT summer, didn't we? And it was such a great big thing. And although there was a huge amount of stuff being minted, and there is a hell of a lot of rubbish, around. Not that I could do it, but there's a lot of firsts that came out last year. So I think, I think that more of the things from last year will be minted, but as we go on in time, definitely that oversupply issue that Christian's talking about will come into play, and naturally there'll be probably fewer and fewer kind of like first pieces or whatever, if you see what I mean. So I think as we go into the future, less of those pieces will be minted. And I think with the art side of things, again, it's probably takes someone who's more kind of like code literate or whatever than I am. But I think the pieces that showcase the art, what the technology could do in terms of artistic expression, like so, the first NFT that showed us an ability to do a certain kind of thing. Like I think, like Da Vinci was like the first person to develop perspective or something in his art. So that's kind of like an important thing. So I reckon that could be something that causes like pieces to be remembered and to be the sort of things that if we were to meet up again in like 20 or 30 years and go, hey, do you remember NFT Summer, how crazy it was with those rabbits and whatever. I'm sure there's lots of pieces that we will remember just because they were the firsts.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up, like contextualizing it in terms of like these were the pieces that came out in NFT Summer, and I think there's something to that this idea that a lot of the pieces from that period will be remembered as the memorabilia of that time. Like I have a copy of Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band that was pressed in 1967, the Summer of Love, and I would never trade it for anything.
Yeah.
Just had to
There's
plug
like
that.
it's like a wonderful nostalgia, isn't it? I mean, like the thing is, like this NFT Summer, it's like it was amazing last year. It's like such a great time, like, and we're not going to forget that as well. Like, we all want it back. Like, if we could have it back this summer as well, we'd have it. So, we've got all these positive memories associated with this stuff. So, I do think it'll be remembered. All that, it's all part of the, the kind of like the amazing excitement of this scene that we're in, isn't it? So, it's great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Nivesh, you were going to say something, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to add that I agree that we might remember these pieces, but I was just checking the price of CryptoKitties, which was like quite famous in 2017. And even the first generation of kitties are not selling for more than 0.1 Ethereum right now, or maybe 0.15. So maybe like even now we remember them, but I would agree with Christian there. I don't think that their prices are going to hold for much longer.
Maybe not. I can foresee a time or a trajectory on some of them anyway, in which they maybe fade into obscurity. But I wonder what if we're gonna have like cult NFTs that sort of almost like movies that are kind of picked up later on by a new community and kind of find new life. Anyway, Brooks, what do you got for us?
Thanks. I mean, that's true with a lot of the archaeologically dug up NFTs that Christian covered not too long ago. I mean, that's kind of was a fad, but I'm sure this is going to be a recurring theme.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think it seems like it's going to probably be really chain dependent, like which chain it's on. If we're talking 20, 30 years, because then we're really getting to the question of what chains will have the staying power. And you kind of alluded to that. I mean, they'll exist, I reckon, but I wonder, because I'm quite confident that Bitcoin is going to have staying power and in fact grow over the next 20, 30 years. I wonder, let's watch out for some NFTs secured on the Bitcoin blockchain, perhaps via stacks. Maybe some of the early ones. If we get one of those to take off, I think that could be an interesting. I mean, if the Bitcoiners use their hodling mentality towards NFTs, I think that could provide a true that might account for a true collectible for a while.
I think this is a kind of an interesting point because I wanted to talk about Bitcoin in the session as well. So I think that serves as a pretty good pivot point. So not to gloss over the fact though, like there are I don't know how many of you guys are watching Stacks or any of the similar projects. I don't know if there are any projects that are doing quite what Stacks is attempting to do. But essentially, we're talking about building DeFi and NFT capabilities secured on the Bitcoin blockchain. What do we, is that, should Bitcoin stay in its lane, or is adding functionality, additional functionality to Bitcoin something that's really feasible? Navesh, this is more of a technical question, and of course, like we met with people in Miami who told us that Stacks was going to be a miracle, and it's going to scale Bitcoin, and we're going to, put all of the world's records on the Bitcoin blockchain. And that seems like a pretty far-fetched idea to me.
Yeah, it is. And it's been going around for some time. It's like,
Yeah.
I think it's the third Miami conference where they will be saying the same thing.
Yes. So you don't buy it?
Frankly, I was like a big maximalist for quite some time. But like I've come to the realization that building is not an easy process, and the kind of development that Ethereum and the resilience that the developers have shown in the past few years, I think Bitcoin hasn't managed that at all. And the reason why Avalanche, Polygon, and Binance did so well is because they were able to leverage the expertise of Ethereum developers. So so we come to the point that developing on Bitcoin is very difficult. Stacks, you see, Stacks has almost everything that you want a blockchain to have. It has some DeFi protocols, it has some DEXs, it has a lot of NFTs. Some of them are trading, I would say, quite a good value as well. But then again, you see the ecosystem, the crypto ecosystem was like, it's the DeFi started from Ethereum, it stayed around Ethereum, and there weren't many users going that side. And I think even people who preferred Bitcoin were kind of had more affinity towards Solana than Stacks. So I would say, yeah, I would say that no, I don't think Stacks, because I have used it. It's not that user friendly. I mean, Solana stops for a while, and you have some glitches, but it's still a lot better than Stacks. And it doesn't have a very strong community. It's just a few people who are doing that. And if you look at what Bitcoin, like Miami people want, they don't want a coin at all. I'm sure you would have heard about Liquid Network as well, and they also have a lot of artist NFTs and games and some DeFi applications, but none of them have caught on any traction whatsoever. So no, I would say that Bitcoin should stick to its path of like exchanges and medium of exchange, and as a collateral and maybe safe haven. Things like Stacks or Liquid Network would increase the fees of the network, which is kind of necessary right now because the block rewards are going down. But unfortunately, we haven't seen anything on that respect. So currently, I would just put my money on Lightning Network and the fact that it's being used as a legal tender elsewhere, and I wouldn't focus on DeFi much, to be honest.
Cool. Thanks for that, Navesh. Any retorts from the room?
I guess I don't know if this is really a retort. I don't know if this is really a retort, but I guess, well, I'm sure with the Stacks Foundation, miners need that, but yeah, I'm not sure. Anyway, I don't. Yeah, building on top of Bitcoin doesn't mean that Bitcoin has to change or not be sort of on a legal tender narrative.
Well, I guess interesting. since the legal tender narrative has come up and it's been particularly relevant this week, I think we should talk about that. I guess as far as the stacks or Bitcoin DeFi NFT capabilities go, I guess the real question there is, and I know what the stacks people would say, and not to put words in their mouths, I shouldn't do that. But the question is, what does building on top of Bitcoin offer that building on top of something like Ethereum doesn't? And I'm sure that, an advocate would say something about, security. But Ethereum's a pretty secure network as well. And as Navesh rightly points out, it's the home of DeFi. It's where that has blossomed. But Bitcoin is taking root in certain places is developing its narrative as a currency, like as a pure currency in a way that other cryptos really haven't. And we see this most prominently in places like El Salvador and now Central African Republic. Nathan, we haven't heard from you yet today, and it's always wonderful to hear your macroeconomic insights. Do you think this indicates that we are on a path towards a world where Bitcoin is, or something like Bitcoin, is recognized more widely, more globally as a means of exchange? Or is this still just a fringe thing with nothing indicating, like, what is the indication to you that about the future of, this wildly volatile digital asset as a day-to-day currency? Realistic?
Yeah, I think it's realistic. I think if you look at Africa, it's got more than 50 countries there. I think makes sense that that's a place where we could see a lot of other countries following suit and adapting crypto. If you look at, I guess, countries like Zimbabwe that are still in a lot of financial trouble, that would make a lot of sense. And some of the other countries there are obviously not too far off Zimbabwe in terms of economics. So I think, it would make a lot of sense. And I think keeping an eye on Latin America and Africa, I think there's a lot of potential there for other countries to adopt it. So I'm bullish on that in terms of adoption. Yeah, totally.
Okay. Brooks.
Oh, thanks, Jacob. I think it's so interesting to see these two countries. I don't know too much about the Central African Republic. I mean, I know El Salvador is probably not the best place to be economically or politically. And, I know they're having a major gang problem, which Bukele is very brutally cracking down on. Apparently the citizens really like it. But anyway, I don't know too much about Central African Republic, but I would still imagine it's not a remarkable place to be economically and politically. So it kind of seems like these two countries could be doing it partially out of desperation, but it's interesting to imagine. Well, one, I wonder what country adopting Bitcoin on Wednesday, what country would it have taken to get some excitement going? I mean, dead gum. And then two, if the narrative plays out, and because the Bitcoiners, they talk about if the first countries to adopt Bitcoin, they will be greatly rewarded in the long term, and the game theory, it's kind of wild to imagine if it does play out over the next 50 years, the Central African Republic and El Salvador end up being some of the preeminent nations in the future if the narrative if they're really rewarded. I mean, a country with a lot more money could just hop in and with so much more money, and probably because El Salvador's bought how many Bitcoin, like 1,000 or something, I don't know. So we'll see. But anyway, thanks.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you point out the idea of places that are in a place of desperation are kind of turning to this new technology as a kind of a Hail Mary way out of a bad situation. And I've heard similar narratives from people who are warning me. I spoke as a political candidate running for Congress yesterday, who was of this camp, warning me that the fiat currency of the United States is going to collapse very soon, and we will find ourselves in a place of desperation, in much the same way. Now this strikes me as a little alarmist, and I don't know if I'm being too casual about it, or if I have unfounded faith in, I don't know, the United States economy, or just the world economy in general. I guess I want to turn it to the room. Like, we've heard these whisperings about fears of recession on, in the wake of Fed rate hikes and all of this gloomy downturn that's going to be on the horizon, and nobody knows how bad it's going to be. I guess my question to you guys is, how bad do you think it's going to be? Do you think are we worrying too much, or do we really need to be bracing for something, some dark times? Mitchell, what do you think? I know you're a very cautious thinker, and you think about mitigating risk for the future quite a bit. I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
I think we're in for some hurt locker in the next.
Oh yeah,
that's what I suspect.
That bad, huh?
I mean, I don't want to be the doomsayer, but equity is looking pretty bad. Especially in the United States, at least. The political situation has gotten more divisive over the last 2 decades in terms of extremism. There's a lot of contention, a lot of discontent boiling under the surface, and I feel like so far in terms of the U.S. leadership here, there have been quick fix solutions that may lead to greater consequences in the future. So I'm not particularly optimistic that we're in for a continuation of the gravy train that we've seen over from like the 80s till 2010.
So what are you, not what are you personally, but what can we be doing to prepare for this? Anything, like, or do we just need?
That's the $1 million question. I mean,
I see.
I've told people this before, but I always say you should have when crap hits the fan plan of being able to either relocate and have a sufficient diversification in the assets that you hold, whether that's between crypto, gold, equities, bonds, that even if there is a major financial crisis, you aren't stuck in a precarious situation where you have to sacrifice a lot of your net worth just to make it by for, say, a year. Because these dislocations, they don't last a long time. It's usually like 6 months, a year. Even if there is like a complete collapse of the system, at most, usually this is like a 5-year affair. And the other thing I'll mention is that every currency regime has at some point in history stopped being like the world reserve currency, and we've seen this happen again and again on like 200-year cycles. So it's not something that people usually have top of mind because it happens on such a long time frame, but it's something that very well has an opportunity of happening within our lifetimes. So most people won't look back to history and see like, oh, eventually the dollar will not be the preeminent currency anymore. What are some ways that I can hedge against this? It's not really a thought that people have. The same way that like 1-year US treasuries are at the risk-free rate of interest when they're not factoring in that there still is indeed a lot of risk, which is holding cash.
Yeah, I think it would be interesting at some point maybe to do one of these weekly chats where we just talk about our bug out plans for the day that you mentioned, Mitchell, when the crap hits the fan. Like, what do we make sure is in our bug out bags, our passports, our hardware wallets, secured in a Faraday bag, etc., and so on. I think that would be a fun topic of conversation.
I mean, worst case scenario, you have your bug out plan, you never use it.
Yep.
You end up with more options, and if done properly, you don't lose that much. I'm not saying that your plan needs to involve you going through a great deal of labor and expense to prepare for the end of the world. I'm not suggesting you become a doomsday prepper.
Oh, not at all.
But I think it's reasonable to say that you should have options of being able to relocate to another country, have a valid passport. And also, I think Ukraine has shown us a good example of this is that you shouldn't be reluctant to be overly cautious. Like many people were saying, even in Ukraine, that the war was unlikely to happen when 170,000 troops are already on the border. And escalation looked very possible, even if there's only a 5 or 10% chance of it devolving into war. But in my mind, even a 5% chance that my house gets shelled or something is not a risk I'm willing to take. I'm going to get the heck out of there. So just not being too stubborn about your odds, because even a small percentage chance of something very bad happening still creates an average that is not great for you. So if you can find ways to mitigate that, I think it's worth thinking about that 5% chance of the worst like what is the worst potential outcome that can happen with reasonable expectation. Like you're not just saying like, oh, like the whole world's going to collapse in nuclear war. Like, okay, if that's the case, everyone's kind of screwed. But does seem to be a very real chance that there will be some sort of financial crisis within the next decade, at least. So what are some small ways that we can hedge against that if it does indeed happen?
Yeah. Shakespeare says the world's a stage, but it's more like a casino in some ways. We've got a few minutes left. One thing we haven't talked about, I think I'm going to try to tie these two things together that may not seem like they're relevant to one another, but I think they are. Edward Snowden, you guys remember Edward Snowden. If you had forgotten about him, he was back in the news this week. Turns out Edward Snowden had a role in the creation of Zcash way back when. Snowden, so you probably all remember, was a famous whistleblower, worked for the NSA, and had eventually relocate to Russia, where I suppose he still is. Does anybody know if Edward Snowden is still in Russia during all this? Sorry, I guess we can look that up at a different point.
I think he's in Moscow still.
In Moscow? Yeah, I mean, I haven't heard anything about. You would think that would have made news if he had relocated, but So Edward Snowden obviously can't come back here, and he has kind of become a figurehead in sort of certain free speech movements around the world, given that all he did arguably was disseminate information. Meanwhile, we have Elon Musk buying one of the world's largest communications platforms and placing it under more or less entirely centralized control. Okay, so here's the question. Can you guys imagine a world in which Elon Musk were held responsible for, let's say, imagine an Edward Snowden figure used Twitter to disseminate state secrets? Can you guys imagine a world in which someone like Elon Musk is held accountable for that? Or, yeah.
I would say that's pretty likely, yeah, based on the kind of response that there's already been to his planned buyout. Yeah, I mean, there's already there's this various government agencies looking to block his purchase, from what I understand, in the last couple of days. And yeah, there are certain people who sort of have made that comparisons to other people in history who have sort of set up a Ministry of Truths and this kind of thing. I mean, I don't know how, extreme if it's that far, but could he be held accountable? Perhaps. Yeah, it's certainly possible. I mean, he's taking it private. We don't know what he's gonna do with it and what what role cryptocurrency will play in that as well. Is he going to move it onto the blockchain? I'm not sure. I think he sees potential in, definitely in crypto, and I think he's a very long-term thinker, which is why he's been successful with Tesla and SpaceX as well, and as far back as PayPal. So what I would say is, I don't think it's something that he just thought about on a whim, and I think a lot of the complaints are from people like, oh, he's just going on Twitter and joking about buying their, buying this social media site. Why didn't he spend the money on something more productive? But I think really there's, there will be some kind of logic to why he's doing this, and what his he'll have a vision, like a 10-year plan. Whether that involves blockchain or not, I don't know, but I do think we'll see, an increasing conversation surrounding the idea of decentralized communications, services and communities, and maybe that forms even around NFTs and ownership of certain digital assets. I think it's early to say. So
yeah, I'm curious to see how the Web3 thing plays out around Twitter as well, because as you guys probably remember, Elon Musk tweeted a few months ago, what was it? Words to the effect of, has anybody seen Web3? I can't find it. And he was kind of taking a jab at this idea that, Web3 is more or less just, at least from that perspective, a hobbyist vanity project for venture capitalists, pouring a bunch of money into these blockchain protocols that they ultimately control themselves. So he seems obviously critical of that in that tweet. But to buy out a company, it 100% is the kind of autocratic move that is really hard to square with, being a proponent or implying that one is a proponent of decentralization. Is that a fair criticism, or am I just being too skeptical of Elon Musk's motives? I think you're right that this is much more studied and intentional than a whim. I could be wrong.
I think let's wait to see. I'm not judging him yet. So I mean, would I, let's put it another way, right? Would I place my bets on Mark Zuckerberg and his plans for Meta, or Elon and Twitter? If it was a choice between the two, I'd probably go with Elon for various reasons, and the various problems that we've seen with Facebook and the way that they handle data over the years, and also just the vision that he's presented for the metaverse and this idea of a gated kind of version of virtual reality in which creators are charged 47% fees for virtual assets they create, which is what Meta plans to do. So yeah, let's see. I mean, it's going to be probably a theme for this decade, as it was for the last one, right? The social media, but this time it's going to be like the role that tokens play in that, and the idea of a so-called metaverse as well.
Yep.
Yeah, I would like to add just one thing. I actually agree with you, Jacob. Like, buying, like, it was actually ironical, because placing your trust in just one person and making him an idol never turns out to be good. And so we have to be skeptical about it. We have seen this inside the industry as well, with Andre Cronje, Daniel Sistigali, but even outside of it as well. Like, you cannot make a person like above all and expect him to do good things always.
Yeah, I mean, I think Christian's right. We'll wait and see, and we don't know a person's intentions, but I do. I saw that letter that was attached to the SEC filing where Elon Musk said that, Twitter has unlimited potential or whatever, and I will unlock it. Like this sort of megalomaniacal idea that I'm the only one, that it's got to be me that will solve the problem, and that's just always something I've been very suspicious of. But anyway, we're on the hour. So does anybody have any closing thoughts?
I'm not sure if
Mitchell?
Elon will be successful in overhauling Twitter.
You don't think so? Is it too? I think Twitter's a little entrenched how it is.
I feel like building a new car and starting from the ground up is easier than taking an existing company and trying to steer the cruise ship out of the iceberg.
Oh my gosh, it's not a job I would want to do. That's for sure. All right, everyone. I want to say thank you all for taking the time to be with us this week. As always, it's been a pleasure. Wonderful conversations all around. I hope you all have a great weekend, and everyone take care. Thanks very much.